Hey, I am so excited today to actually talk to you. This is Hazel. If you haven't followed my channel, you should awesomely click that like and subscribe button and leave a comment below if this actually just gives you information that you didn't know. Okay, so we're gonna start. What is the difference between a tincture, a glycerite, and a tea? All of these are taken internally by mouth, okay? So let's just get into it. Let's start with a tea, okay? That's what most people are doing. So what it is they steep the herb into hot water, boiling water, hot water, it doesn't matter. But as long as it's hot water, you let it sit for about 15 minutes. It infuses in the water. And when it infuses in the water, that's how you make tea. Basically, if you are Southern like me, you grew up on sweet tea. Okay, you just grew up on sweet tea. So this is that black tea. You know, that black dark tea that's extra, extra sweet that your teeth fall out just looking at it. That's it. Okay, but I want to go through, there are many different teas out there. Basically, every single thing, every herb that you steep in water is technically a tea. Some are considered green teas. Some are white teas. That just depends on the herb that you're using. So say that we are doing a chamomile. We're putting chamomile about a teaspoon to a tablespoon, depends on what you like, how strong you want it. You put a teaspoon or a tablespoon in an infuser. It can be paper, it can be cloth, it can be a metal mesh little thing. Okay, you can put that in there and let it sit for 15 minutes. And then at the end of the 15 minutes, you add whatever sugars that you need, white sugar, you can do honey, you can do agave, you can do, what's the other big one? Maple syrup. You can do maple syrup. It has to be the real stuff, not no log cabin, okay? No. No Ms. Butterworths. But really, for real. You want the absolute organic, most best everything. If you're gonna do a tea, you better do it right. Okay, so we add our sweetener to it, and then we just sip on it. We enjoy it. It helps our bodies from the inside out. Starts with the digestive system and works through the blood system. Okay, so that's our tea. That is the weakest of the three. Next, we'll move up to the glycerite because that's the next stronger, but it's not as strong as an actual tincture. So our glycerites are made with a vegan, organic, vegetable kind of herby sugar. Basically, it's the sweetness is pulled out of the plant. So a glycerite is very, very, very sweet. So if you have issues with sugar, yes, glycerites are very good. If you're diabetic, a little bit goes a long way. It does actually work like honey, so it raises the glycemic index pretty quickly, but it also drops it back down pretty quickly. So think about that if you're a diabetic and you need something like a tincture, but you don't want the alcohol. That is where you would go, unless you do a tea. Then a tea you can do, it's the weakest of the three, but you can still do it and you can add whatever sugars you need to. So when you put the plant material into the liquid material, which would be the glycerite, they're boiled together. I wouldn't boil it, but I would simmer it to where it's a steady heat for about an hour. Make sure you're stirring it, it doesn't stick or burn to the pot. And then you will decant by taking out the plant material, and what you're left with is the active constituents inside of the glycerin. Then you will want to use distilled water, and it's very important that you use distilled water, and you do 50-50 with the glycerin and with the distilled water. The distilled water will shorten the shelf life, so my personal way of doing my apothecary is I do not mix the distilled water into the mother until I know that it's going to be sold or it's going to be taken. So say I'm making a catnip glycerite, I am only going to make that 50-50 when it's time to use it. So the glycerite will be labeled and it will sit there, and it has a very long shelf life with just the glycerin because the sugar is very acidic. So therefore it will hold on to that shelf life. No bacteria will grow. Once you add the water, it dilutes it, and that's where bacteria tends to grow because it's a weaker environment. So keep that in mind if you're making a glycerite. If you plan on keeping it a long-term period of time, you do not want to mix the distilled water with it. Just make sure that you label it that it does not have the distilled water, because that's very important. It can mean life or death with certain glycerites that you make, because it can be too potent for a person, especially a small child. Next, we go to tinctures, which are the most potent of them all. And that is when you're putting it in an alcohol base. So say, for instance, I do, I can't really say the words, but it's a moody vegan. So my mimosa tincture is mimosa flower and a 90 proof alcohol. Can be 80 or 90 proof. It just depends on the amount of water that the plant has in it. If it's a flower, you want to use 90 because it has a lot more water. It's very hard to dehydrate all the water out of a flower. And with these specific flowers, they look like dog fur when you dehydrate them, and it's just not as potent to me. So I do the folk method with that, and I will literally do pretty much 3/4 of a jar of flour, and then I will finish filling it up with alcohol. So 90 proof vodka of some sort. It can be brandy, it can be vodka, but 90 proof is what it needs to be. So you will let that sit 4 to 6 weeks, and then you take the herb out and you're left with the liquid, which is usually a brown color. Do not be discouraged. That is what it's supposed to look like, and that means that the active constituents has moved from the flower or the plant to the liquid, and that is what you want. That is extremely the best thing for your practice, is to make sure that you have these herbs and they are that color when you're done. They are the strongest, which means that will be a different dosage than what you would get as if it were a tea or if it were a glycerite. So certain things require less. Tinctures will be one of those.